can like everyone hear me? Alright, yeah. Alright, thanks. Alright, so basically I just wanted to start off with this interview saying that our main focus here today is to A, learn, and to B, get a better understanding of the police and just like the racial disparity in our country and in Portland.
So we have compiled a list of questions for you, Chief, that all come from the entire upper school community. The focus of these questions are on police brutality and the bias within the police force.
Okay, so basically, Black people only make up like 5% of the United States population as a whole, but we like make up over like 40% in the prison population. And I just wanted to say it's not because Black people are like inherently more criminal, and because of this, Black people have become a target to the police and just to the nation as a whole. And only like 36% of Black people believe that their local police treat blacks and whites equally. So I was wondering, what can be done to change this distrust and to bridge the gap between communities of color and the police, both here in Portland and just like on a national scale?
Yeah, sure. Is this on now? Anybody? How about this?
Yep.
All right, perfect. First, let me just say thanks for having me. I do appreciate the opportunity to Principal Libby and to you for the invitation. I love the format in general. I think it's pretty special to have a school like this in the city of Portland, and I really appreciate you having me here. I would also say in the 6th grade, I wasn't rocking it out with a microphone and talking to a couple hundred people. It just wouldn't have happened. And I know that after this is when the real work's going to get done, when you have an opportunity to sit in smaller groups and kind of work through and process what you've heard today and what you think about these particular issues. So again, thanks for having me, and here we go. So as far as what we can do, we're doing it right now. Right? I think when we start talking about huge systemic issues and problems that have plagued our country, like racism, for hundreds of years, really, you can talk about changing systems and what we're going to do, but what we do is we start building relationships one person at a time. And I tell that to Portland police officers all the time, is that, it's not on. So, how's that? All right. So as I was saying, should I start all over again? You don't want to hear that whole mess. I'll just say thank you, blah, 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 and then I'll dive right into the question. So when we start talking about systemic issues, as a profession, specifically to law enforcement, which I can talk about obviously for a long, long time here, we need to do a better job of mirroring our community. So if, based on 2010 census data, the city of Portland is 7% African American, or black based on their terminology, then I want the Portland Police Department to be at least 7% black. Because I want our citizens to see themselves in police officers that respond to various situations. I think that when I talk to Portland police officers all the time, I'm talking to them about dealing with people one-on-one, right? It's never an us versus them scenario. It's never a personal confrontation. They should be professional and businesslike always. And they should be dealing with these situations as Mike to Lowell, Mike to Todd, Todd to Steve, to deal with individuals as they wish they were treated in every situation. And I think that's incredibly important, because I know we can get a little bogged down on, we need to change this into this, but we can all make a drastic, immediate impact by just simply dealing with each other as human beings and using that golden rule, right? I want to treat you as I wish I was treated in those same exact circumstances. So there's a lot of things that we can do individually as well as a system that we need to do. And to have Waynflete, to have you invite me here today to do this, to me goes a long way. And people may disagree with what I have to say. They probably won't. This is pretty straightforward for me. It's not a heavy lift. It's common decency, it's civil rights, it's enforcing the Constitution for all. I've been wearing a uniform for more than half of my life to defend the Constitution and defend our country, whether it's in the Marine Corps or as a police officer for the last 20 years. So it's not a question in my mind. And I can tell you I've been asked, and I chuckle because people say, Chief, say Black Lives Matter. And I go, Black Lives Matter? Why wouldn't Black Lives Matter? I don't understand where the confrontation and where the question lies. Of course Black Lives Matter. I hear a group of people that say, as an example, we feel disenfranchised, we feel targeted. We want people to care when somebody gets killed in our community. We want somebody to care when somebody's civil rights are violated. And I say, of course you do, why wouldn't you? That's what everybody should expect and demand, everybody in our entire country. So it's a no-brainer to me.
All right, sorry, just to follow up really quickly, you were talking about the diversity in the police force, just like in the department in Portland.
Sure.
I was wondering, like percentage-wise, how diverse is it, and if there's anything being done to get more people of color on the force?
Yeah, I think that that's great. And I think, you know, one aspect of my job and one aspect of our police officers' job, the police officers are our best recruiters. They're out in the community, they're making contact with people. You know, part of my regular talks now is I go out and talk about safety, and I'm talking to neighborhood groups, I'm talking about the opioid epidemic that's killing an entire generation in our country. And then I always slide in at the end, if you're interested in being a Portland police officer, please come forward in a couple years. And we're more than happy to put you through that process, because we want, again, to mirror our community. So about 5% of our police department are people of color, and about 4% of those are African American. And if I said that 7% of the city of Portland are African American, obviously we're behind, and we've been behind for a long time. I'm proud to say, you know, we've got the first African-born male police officer in the state. I'm proud to say we've got the first Somali Muslim female police officer in the state of Maine. But they got hired because they're good people. I didn't hire them because they're this or they're that demographically. I hired them because they're good people, and they want to help, and they want to do this work. It's difficult in recruiting. We hire less than 3% of the people that apply to be Portland police officers. So if you take the census data that says 7%, that 7% counts if you're a 2-week-old baby or you're 80 years old. It counts whether you're interested, not interested. It doesn't matter. If I take 3% off the top of that, the pool that we're trying to draw from is incredibly small. So we need to maximize opportunities whenever possible. And I think recruiting helps if you first and foremost, one of the cornerstones of what we do and what we count on is trust and relationships. If we're not trusted as an agency or as a profession, why would anybody want to apply to be a police officer? So we have to build that. And we do that with a lot of youth programming and a lot of community policing and a lot of outreach work.
Great, thank you, Chief. So we're going to talk a little bit about peaceful protests. So the purpose of peaceful protests is to disrupt the flow of life in order to draw attention to certain issues. So what is the police's role in assisting these peaceful protests, and at what point should the police use their force to intervene?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, in 20 years as a Portland police officer, there have been countless peaceful protests in the city of Portland. And I will tell you that the role of the Portland Police Department, the law enforcement in my mind, is to facilitate everybody's First Amendment right. So if you're protesting, that's a First Amendment right to do so. And we want to make sure that you're safe as a protester. So what we do is we reach out to the organizers and say, where are you going to go, where are you going to be, so we can block traffic, we can help you get from A to B, wherever you want to go. And that's our first and primary role in all these situations. And we've had countless protests that have had no issues whatsoever.
We've also had scenarios where if you're blocking a lane of traffic, right, that's against the law. But we facilitate those protests just like we would anything else, because I want people to have the opportunity to voice their opinion. And I think when issues of safety arise, that changes the equation in my mind. And you can think about, and you may be referring to the Commercial Street protest that we had. The Portland Police Department arrested 18 people on Commercial Street. And I'm not happy about that. We tried to facilitate First Amendment rights for hours. Even though the protesters in that scenario asked us to be arrested multiple times. They came up and said, when are you going to arrest us? And we said, we're just blocking traffic. That's what we're doing. And then they're involved in a situation with a vehicle that pulled out in the traffic, and then the protesters were in danger. The operator of the car felt he was in danger. There were people draping themselves over a car. It changed the dynamics that I couldn't allow that to happen and to continue to happen, because now we have a safety concern. And we have a safety concern with hundreds of people, and ultimately at the end of the day, thousands of people on Commercial Street observing what's occurring, which is cool. But I can also tell you at bar time in the Old Port, I'm concerned that I'm going to get a bunch of drunk people interacting with protesters that are there peacefully minding their own business. And is that going to be a safe situation? So we're forced to make a call on that point. That decision was ultimately mine to change that scenario from we're just going to monitor traffic, which we did for hours, and now we're going to have to be more proactive about what we do.
Actually, my next question is specifically about that rally that you were
Okay.
talking about.
Yep.
So basically, for people who don't know, there was a rally, I think it was like the end of August or just like towards the end of summer. And so basically, I personally had my cousin and a friend who were like protesting, and I actually had like another friend who was like walking home, who was apprehended by the police for like legit doing absolutely nothing besides minding his own business and just going home. But in regards to my cousin and her friend, who are both Muslim and black, and whose families are like refugees, they were apprehended and then I think went to either the police station or to some other sort of facility, I can't remember, but like their hijabs were taken off forcibly by like male officers when they specifically asked for a female officer. So basically, just in regards to that tragedy, I just was wondering, when police do something as horrible as that, like who polices the police?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question because there's been a lot of confusion around that component of what occurred from my perspective. Because there's no question that Portland police officers were on Commercial Street and have made arrests. I was there through the entire event. I witnessed the entire event. I supervised the entire event. So if there's any issue with that, that's on me. And I'm fine to have that conversation with anybody at any point. But in that scenario, we made arrests in the city of Portland. Then we transported those arrests to the Cumberland County Jail. Now, what we do when we get to the Cumberland County Jail is we fill out some paperwork, and then we transfer custody of those individuals to Cumberland County Jail staff. And then at that point, the deputies that work corrections in that facility were the ones that were involved in this particular scenario. I called Sheriff Joyce after that when I found out that there was a problem and said, listen, this is what I'm hearing in the community. And based on what I'm hearing, there is a problem. And I can't imagine with an organization like that you don't have policies to address exactly how this is played out. So Kevin came out initially and said, based on everything that I see here, I don't see a policy violation. Ultimately, at the end of his investigation, he fully admitted that they violated their own policy. And they violated these young ladies' rights. And it's a terrible violation of their religious freedoms and who they are as a person. And it goes above and beyond embarrassment in that world for them individually to be put on in the paper as an example without that precedent is absolutely terrible. And that shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't happen again.
But just to like go back to the question real quick, like, but once I think specifically like the police when they do something wrong, yeah,
Yep.
like who like.
Perfect. So I think we've got 30 minutes we could talk for the rest of the year. So I'm going to try and pick out pieces of this. But so who polices the police? So for us, there's an internal affairs process. And that means that anybody, any walk of life, they can have an anonymous complaint. They don't have to identify themselves. They can come forward and file a complaint against a police officer. That complaint is in turn investigated by the police department, trained investigators that can actually look at these scenarios. And then it's reviewed, in our case, by 5 different people that goes up the entire chain of command. I'm the last one that takes a look at these investigations. And then if it's an external complaint, any complaint made by a citizen of this community or otherwise is then reviewed by a police citizen review subcommittee. These are all third-party civilians that have nothing to do with the police department. Then they review the investigation and how that occurred, and they're responsible for the timeliness, objective nature, and fairness of those investigations. So there is a reviewing component of our internal affairs investigation. And I'll say that for me, when I hear who polices the police, what I say is that when we have internal affairs investigations, that I suspend people, I fired people, people have resigned, multiple day suspensions, anything from a training to a verbal warning, and it runs the gamut of what situations we run into. We've referred police officers for criminal charges to the district attorney's office. So I often say, so who's policing the police? If I'm doing all of those things internally, I think as a trained professional that does this for a living, I am policing our agency. If somebody could make a valid argument and say, who's policing the police? if you filed 100 complaints and 99 of them were not sustained and nothing ever happened to anybody. I can tell you that's not the case. We want to run a professional organization that takes care of our citizens. And if I'm not doing that, I need to be held accountable by my boss, who's the city manager of the city of Portland, and they can fire my butt. That's the way it should run.
Great, thank you, Chief. So now we're going to talk a little bit about police training. So to start, so in potentially violent situations, how are your officers trained in order to avoid the instinctive and inherent human characteristic of bias in these split-second decisions?
Above and beyond bias, they're making split-second decisions in every one of those scenarios. But for us, the word of the day in 2016 is diversion and de-escalation. Right? The key is not to get into a physical confrontation with anybody. So every one of our police officers is trained in what they call tactical communications. So that means we're deflecting scenarios and we're trying to de-escalate scenarios. And the goal is to not ever have to be forced to lay hands on somebody in any one of those scenarios. We also have every one of our police officers, all 163, are what we call crisis intervention team trained. And that's another form of de-escalation, specifically to people that are in a mental health crisis. We have extensive training on the substance use issues that we deal with every day, all the time, so that officers are using those filters in their mind first before they get into a use of force situation. I say the word of the day is diversion. My goal is to divert people out of the criminal justice system, out of the hospitals, out of the homeless shelters, and into a long-term and productive and healthy life. So that's our first and foremost priority. When you start talking about use of force issues, whether it's deadly force issues or laying hands on somebody and wrestling with somebody to the ground, we do scenario-based training so that we build muscle memory. So it's not the very first time you've ever seen this or that. It changes when somebody's pointing a gun at you, which they have myself. I can speak to that. And I know that there's a distinct difference. The physiological effects of stress is what we're fighting. You say the natural human component. When somebody's pointing a gun at you, or they have a knife in their hand, or they say they're going to kill you, then everything in your system gets amped up. And we have to build muscle memory to combat some of that, so that you are able to remain as calm as humanly possible, and you can react accordingly without overreacting in a lot of these situations.
Yeah. So in response to your response, so we believe that all human beings have some form of bias. We have preconceived notions of how people act, the way that they conduct themselves. And so you have a police force that are human beings that have this inherent bias. So in what ways do you have any training programs that sort of train police to not act upon their bias in these split-second situations, or to sort of act with that bias in general?
Yeah, sure. So that kind of training, whether it's implicit bias or cultural diversity training, starts at the police academy. It's an 18-week police academy in Vassalboro. You stay there Monday through Friday. Classes generally go about 16 hours a day, whether it's physical training or really learning about the Constitution and talking about constitutional policing. So there's a class at that level where we have those conversations. And then every year, every police officer in the state of Maine receives upwards of 40 hours of training. And about half of that is mandated training through the Board of Trustees at the Criminal Justice Academy. That means they're saying these topics are incredibly important and everybody must have them. And then the back half of that is more voluntary based, where as a police chief I pick out 20 hours of training that I think is important, and we do training on that aspect. So in 2013 we had a refresher on cultural diversity and implicit bias.
And that's just the formalized training. We have these conversations in roll call settings all the time. Because I'll see something nationally and go, that's not the way we do business. And then we have those conversations with officers. So how would you react if this happened? Let's talk about what that officer was seeing and why they did what they did. Let's talk about why the officer was wrong in what they did. So we have those conversations much more than once a year or every few years.
All right, just to really quickly follow up on that, I was just wondering how effective, first of all, I was wondering how long, or when these trainings have started, and how effective they've been.
You'd have to tell me how effective they've been as a community, I think. On our end, I think we hire officers now with the intent that I want communicators. What officers do every day, it's not a TV, movie. We don't solve crimes in an hour. What we do is we communicate, we mediate, and we facilitate. That sounds like a catchphrase because I've obviously used that before. That's what we do every day, all day, is we communicate with people. It's not foot chases and bank robberies. It's helping people through, in many cases, what is the worst day they've ever had. And that worst day may be their dog ran away or got hit by a car. It could be that somebody broke into their home. It could be that they were assaulted or a loved one overdosed and is dead. So our officers are out there communicating, mediating these situations, and facilitating. And I think our officers are very open to these conversations around implicit bias because we're hiring the best people humanly possible in the city of Portland. You'll never hear me say we don't make mistakes or that there hasn't been an implicit bias involved in decision making in the past or today, because I do believe it exists for everybody. But we have to do the best job we can to mitigate those kind of scenarios by training and hiring good people and working through these scenarios in advance.
Sorry, I have to follow on this again. But like to answer the question that you asked earlier on like how well you guys are doing, I was just thinking about that. Like in Portland, I think you said like 7% of the population are black people, but we make over like 18% of the arrests, and that's like 2015. So I was wondering, like, how much say you have in these trainings, and have you had like other people outside of the community or experts in these trainings come in and try to like modify it or try to make it better?
Sure. So the 2014 numbers is what you're talking about. And I gave these at a presentation for the NAACP at the library on Congress Street at the beginning of 15, probably when that happened. So if you look at that census information, and if we said that 7% of our community are black, again based on their terminology, but yet 18% of our arrests are black, I say that that's a disproportionate minority contact. There's no question about that. I would also just caution us to be careful around statistics, because I could also tell you that 42% of the people we arrest aren't from Portland. So if you use that information, then what baseline are we actually utilizing? I don't have any doubt, and I would never say that we don't have disproportionate minority contacts, because I know we do. I just don't know what the final percentages are, because if 42% of the people that we arrest aren't from Portland, they're from away coming here, then I'm not sure what the final results are. We have had conversations with folks nationally. We're having conversations now even with the International Association of Chiefs of Police looking at what's a 40-hour course on implicit bias. And on my end, I want to make sure that the training that we give to our entire department has true value and has shown itself to make a difference at the end. So we're still trying to research a valuable class that everybody could have, very similar to, if I think crisis intervention team training works, I'm going to have everybody do it. We're one of the few police departments in the entire country that has all of our officers trained in that, because I think it's important. So if I find a class that I think is important and that I think is valid and valuable, then that's something that I want to bring forward to everyone.
Sorry, that's another question. But do you have dialogues, or not even just, like, do you bring people of color who have been affected by like interactions with police into the police department? And do you guys have not only dialogues and conversations, but have action afterwards that is taken?
Yeah. So for us, I can tell you that they don't come into the police department. I go to them, right? And it may be I go to the mosque on Anderson Street. I'm there on a regular basis to talk to them and to sit down and say, how are we impacting your world? How can we better work together? There's impacts. The FBI just put out stats yesterday saying that hate crimes against Muslims were up 67% last year. Staggering numbers. So for me, that's a call to the imam on Anderson Street. It's saying, hey, what can we do to work together? Whether it's the election and how divisive that was for everybody involved, or a scenario will happen anywhere in the world. That means we reach out to folks. I will tell you that our community policing program is based on outreach and advocacy and getting out into various communities and neighborhoods to have conversations just like that. We graduated a class called SEALs Fit, and I would hope that, put this in the back of your mind there. SEALs Fit is a 7-week, 21-session course for youth, sophomores, juniors from various high schools in the region And it's the 9th session that we've done. And that includes about 20 or so youth. And Mondays and Fridays, they work with retired Navy SEALs, and they work on professional development, they work on physical fitness and how that raises self-esteem. On Wednesdays, they have a 3-hour course that's on personal development. It's about leadership skills, everything from how to shake a hand and look somebody in the eye, to bullying, to substance use issues, to bettering our communities. And traditionally, that's been 95% people of color. And it's just another tool of trying to get out there and make connections. So how SEALs fits into this is that police officers are mentors in this scenario. I don't want cops to have short hair and mirrored shades and black and white cars, and that's all you see is people driving by. I want to develop personal relationships. Whether it's a school resource officer at Portland or Deering High School that interact with youth every day, that has incredible value because you're not getting and helping form your opinions based on the news or local stories or anecdotal information or information from a cousin or a friend. You actually develop a one-on-one relationship with somebody who happens to be a police officer. And I think if we're seen as human beings, everybody is seen as human beings first, and then professions and all that other stuff later, that we're going to be halfway home.
Great. So our president-elect ran on a platform of making America safe again. So we're wondering, how do you feel that this renewed emphasis on law and order will affect communities of color?
Well, it's an interesting catchphrase, I guess. I think that personally, I've been appalled by the entire process that we've had over these elections. It's been incredibly divisive, very focused on hate. That's not making anybody safe. That doesn't make police officers safe. It's a law and order candidate, but that's not, in fact, really the way that comes through. Whether it's women in our population, racist comments that he made, building walls, throwing people out of the country, none of those situations make anybody feel safer. And if I say the cornerstone of law enforcement is building trust and relationships, that does neither. So I'm concerned that obviously it all remains to be seen. We had all these stuff that were thrown out there, what was going to happen. And then already there's been a lot of those things that have been scaled back. Most of them for the better. He's not going to the extremes that he had mentioned during the election process. But I am concerned that there'll be a scaling back of Department of Justice work that they've done. And if your police department is unconstitutional and you're doing things wrong out in your community, your police officers are criminal or immoral, or again unconstitutional, that needs to be dealt with. And if police chiefs and communities don't deal with it, then the federal government comes in and deals with it with DOJ investigations and consent decrees. If that gets scaled back just simply because it's a slogan, then that is incredibly unfortunate for everybody involved. And we don't want to lose ground in any scenario. We want to make sure that our police officers are doing the right thing out there. I think that good teachers, good students, good police officers want to make sure that anybody that they're sitting to the left and right of are doing the right thing because they make us all look terribly bad. And they're impacting people's lives every day. Police officers carry guns. They have an opportunity based on the law to detain people against their will. If they're not doing their job correctly, it needs to be addressed. And if our president doesn't see it that way, that's problematic.
So we're gonna have one last question, then we're gonna open it up to the audience if they have a few. So just to close, so for us as law-abiding citizens, as students who are striving to get best education possible, what can we do to not only help you do your job efficiently, but also help to rid our country of these great racial disparities in regards to the police?
I mean, first and foremost is be involved, keep an open mind, be educated, and form your own opinion about what's happening locally, what's happening nationally, and reach out to people. If you want to figure out why a police officer or a police agency did something and you may not live in the city of Portland, get a group together and contact your local department and say, what are you doing? Because I do think that, as the principal stated, all I'm looking for is an opportunity to get in front of people and have these conversations. And I think if we can do that, and if we can realize that everybody has value, and that nobody should be painted in a corner with a broad brush to say that all police officers are this, All people of color are that. All people that have substance use disorders must be this. If you're homeless, you are that. We cannot start any conversation that way. So we all need to work on these issues, and we need to work on them together. Because in a time when everybody is doing far more with far less, if we're not collaborating, if we're not working together, then we're never going to make any progress, and that would be our own fault. So on my end, what I know is that I need to be out there. It drives me crazy. You know, I'll look at Ferguson, you can look at Baton Rouge, you can look at 100 communities across the country, and after a bad thing happens, and it doesn't matter what the definition of that would be, a police chief jumps in front of a microphone and says, we need to get together and start meeting with people. And I go, you probably should have been meeting with people 15 years ago. Because if you're meeting with people now, so once something has happened, you are already lost. You are playing catch up in a time when emotions are incredibly raw. You have to have those relationships right now. And we all have to work on them every day. So again, we got a few more questions there, but again, I appreciate you having me here either way.
So Lowell, do we have time for questions? All right.
All right, I saw your hand up first.
In the past few years, the concept of qualified immunity has come under fire for allowing police officers not to be accountable for civil rights violations. So I was wondering, what's your experience with qualified immunity, and what do you feel are the benefits, and what are some of the cons?
You know, for us, it's been a point of contention, I think, nationally. It's a great question. And I do think that in various situations, police officers do have qualified immunity, but not in the vast majority of situations. I can guarantee that. That police officers should be held accountable. And if a piece of that is through lawsuits and things of that nature, then that should absolutely apply. If you haven't done anything wrong, what are you worried about? Right? You have to be as transparent as humanly possible, which is why I'm more than happy to answer any question anybody has. Because on my end, I think we run a pretty good police department. Again, we're not perfect, and we always need to strive for that next level. But well, you can hide things. You can. I can refuse to come out and have these conversations. That's not doing anybody any good at all. So I get upset on my end because district attorneys and judges all have qualified immunity as well. So they talk a pretty good game about you should go do this and you should go do that. When they have qualified immunity pretty much across the board, when police officers have it in a very small segment of what we do.
So to follow up, does that mean that you feel that it's outdated? Do you think that the police department could operate without qualified immunity and potentially be more accountable to the community?
I think in most situations we do that now. I think there's a misunderstanding about what police officers are immune from. Police officers go to jail, police officers get sued. I can tell you as a chief, I'm involved in every lawsuit that has anything to do with the police department. I wasn't there, I didn't see it, I had nothing to do with it, but they sue me just because it's a name, just like they sue the city manager or somebody else. Qualified immunity is not a situation that we run into very often at all as police officers.
Nick?
You said when a complaint is filed with the police department that it goes to a third party.
Sorry, could you just be like a little bit louder and stand up? Sorry.
You said when there's a complaint that goes to the police department that it goes to a third party committee for review. How are those members elected, and what is the diversity within that?
Yeah, it's a civil service board. So it's a board that is selected by a committee of city councilors. And civil service was meant traditionally under employment regards, so that I didn't hire my second cousin because he's a family member and he's not qualified, but we just worked that out. Civil service has been in place in the city of Portland for decades. And then additionally on top of that, for the last 20 years or so, there's been an additional civil service group. This is this Police Citizen Review Subcommittee. I will tell you that they are all white. 3 of the 6 are attorneys, defense attorneys. And on my end, in that committee's end, we need to seek better recruitment as far as having candidates apply. It's not something where people are naturally appointed to do these positions. They have to come forward, they have to apply for them, and be interested in that world. So it's absolutely something that that committee has had plenty of conversations about recruiting. There's been open seats on that committee for a long time. They try to put the word out, they try to put it on, they've had news stories about it, and still there's limited folks that want to come in on their off time, on their family time, and deal with those situations. But whether it's the city of Portland and those 1,600 residents, or employees rather, Police Citizen Review Subcommittee, the police department, the fire department, everybody in any of those walks of life needs to mirror our community. So there's no question that needs to be more diverse.
Why is diversity even,
Sorry, I'm sorry. Could you stand up and like just a little bit louder?
why is diversity in these positions even so important at all? Is it not more prudent to hire based on merit and race?
Yeah, I think that I think you have merit with race. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think that it's important that all aspects of our community is represented, and I think that we can have both of those scenarios in any walk of life. When I say that we hire police officers because I want the best human beings possible, and if you happen to be this or you happen to be that, then that's fine by me. But if I can have the best human beings possible and they mirror our community, that's a win-win for everybody. And I think it's the same way whether it's a committee scenario or a police department, that we know that, well, what happened here when I said that everybody on this committee is white? People went, you gotta be kidding. Does this have any value if not all aspects of our population are being represented? And I think it's a valid point.
All right, sorry, but if other people have questions, do you mind if I like hand out your email?
Sure.
All right, cool. But,
Home address, come on over. I'll barbecue, hang out.
but this is a gift from Waynflete, and I just wanted to Okay, all right, guys, lunch is next.